Former Trump-supporting evangelicals that helped carry him to victory in 2016 are taking a bit of a pause during this election. So now, an example of that is a recent op-ed in The Hill, where a couple of white evangelical voters have signaled their willingness to not cast their votes for Donald Trump and say that there is a significant amount of people that are behind him that are thinking the same thing. So now this was written by Ryan and Catherine Hurlbert, two such voters, again, who wrote this op-ed to try to explain themselves. So they write, quote, we are white evangelical married couple living in Georgia. So that's Donald Trump's whole base there. We have worked on evangelical missions across various cultural contexts and are absolutely committed to upholding the dignity and value of all human life, including those who are not yet born. But having witnessed the negative effects that the administration has had on vulnerable people, particularly refugees and other immigrants, we are among the significant number of evangelical Christians who will not vote for the president again. So now that is very interesting, right? And look, I think it's really kind of up to you whether or not you want to take them at face value, take their words and be like, I don't know, they might say this in public, but they're still probably just going to pull the lever for Donald Trump. And so, I don't really know if I buy it. I can understand the skepticism. I'm always skeptical of this as well. But let's continue to read on, right? Because they're actually talking about something that's a really important part of Donald Trump's entire pitch to be reelected, or I should say his original pitch to be elected versus his reelection pitch, which is all about law and order. But his first election pitch, which is actually about immigration, right? So now, before I get into that, they did cite a recent Fox survey that found that if the election were tomorrow, his margin of victory with white evangelicals would be 38 points. That's about half, or I should say a little less than half, versus him, or I should say him versus Hillary Clinton. And so 38 points down from his advantage of 61 over Clinton, which is interesting. So obviously we know that they massively broke for Donald Trump back in 2016 and not for Hillary. And now they're saying, well, we're going to start breaking for Biden, or at least breaking away from Donald Trump. Interesting stuff. So now they said that our critical values have not changed since 2016. We were uncomfortable back then with the credible reports of his marital infidelities, his bullying tone, and disparaging comments on immigrants. But we also were, and certainly still are, deeply committed to protecting the lives of children in the womb and the freedom to practice our faith without interference. We felt that we had chosen the lesser of two evils when we voted. Now, I know that argument. I kind of felt the same way when I voted for Hillary Clinton back in 2016. And I'm definitely feeling this way again when I consider voting for Joe Biden in this election. Lesser of two evils. And so they had those people on the same side, or on the other side, I should say, that were saying the same thing. Okay. All right. Interesting. So now they said that while the president has delivered on some issues of concern for us, such as economic reforms and trade deals, basically tax cuts for the rich, and against trade, which is interesting, his immigration policies, they point out, are cruel, undermining his pledges to life and religious freedom. For instance, while we cherish unborn lives, and this is the third time they bring it up, so they are really pushing that. No, we're pro-life, we're pro-life, guys. We're totally 100% pro-life, but even though we don't agree with Donald Trump, and they try to actually frame their disagreement with Donald Trump through that pro-life lens, which I think is actually pretty interesting. They said that while we cherish unborn lives, we also value the lives of thousands of children who were separated from their mothers or fathers by zero tolerance policies of the administration at the Mexican border in 2018. So they looked at that policy of child separation. They were not happy about that. All right. And look, to be fair, like, this is kind of what you voted for. Like, I get it, right? He openly signaled that he was going to be cruel to immigrants, that he did not want them to be in this country. And boy, did he deliver. Children in cages, not being given beds or toothbrushes, sexual assault happening to minors, which was rampant, and by some members of ICE. So, I mean, come on. Which leads me to read you the next line. They said that our commitment to life also compels us to do everything that we can to end human trafficking. So they said that the administration has decided to suspend the life-saving elements of the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, the passage of which evangelical Christians proudly championed under George Bush, and the flouting of which evangelical ministries like World Vision and International Justice Mission have decried. So I'm guessing that these people, from what I'm hearing, they're not exactly QAnon, right? So, all right, it's nice to see some Republicans are not into crazy town, haven't bought into that garbage. All right, great. Now, our convictions on life, they also say, are why we strongly believe the United States should continue to be, in the famous words of George Washington, a safe and agreeable asylum to the virtuous and persecuted part of mankind, to whatever nation they might belong. Rather than continue the life-saving tradition of asylum and resettlement of refugees, this administration has shut out persecuted refugees with its immigration policies. So, now, again, pro-immigration, but of course it's going to be pro-Christian immigration or asylum. Okay? And so, interestingly enough, it's kind of the Mormon position, right? Now, Mormons are generally pretty conservative, or at least the voting bloc is, right? However, they view immigration and asylum as pretty important, right? I mean, for example, go back to Ammon Bundy, right? Ammon Bundy favors, got a pro-immigration position, right? Very anti-government, but very pro-immigration, and has even signaled support for Black Lives Matter, right? Especially over the police. Then again, shouldn't be all surprising because of Ammon Bundy's previous encounters with police. And so, hey, there's one BLM that the Ammon Bundy boys are actually in favor of. Fascinating. Very fascinating. All right. So now they continue by saying, denying asylum to those fleeing persecution is not a commitment to life, since many are fleeing persecution on account of their faith, and undercuts the pledge of the president on religious freedom. Again, interesting, very interesting perspective here. Now, of course, they note that as the alarming findings from Evangelical Ministries Open Doors and World Relief note, the number of refugees from countries where Christians face the most persecution is on track for a decline of 90% this year versus 2016. Now, notice, again, they're only interested in Christians, right? Coptics from Syria, for example, a lot of them were shut out, right? And conservatives, they talked a lot about that. And I talked about that a little bit too, because I think that all refugees should be welcome regardless of their faith, right? These people are more like, we didn't let enough Christians, and so we should totally do that. Well, why not let in the Muslims as well, and the Jews from that area? If you're a refugee, you should be welcomed here in this country, because we are supposed to be a place where people could come to safely, right? And so, again, I think they should be welcomed. But anyway, at least they're looking at Donald Trump's hypocrisy in this issue, which, again, it is pretty interesting. In fact, they say that this is not what the president promised to evangelical voters. During his first week in office, he criticized the previous administration for admitting too few Syrian refugees and promised to assist them. And then, hours after he made that pledge, and this is classic Donald Trump, he signed an executive order that drastically restricts the number of refugees to enter the United States, including an indefinite ban on all Syrian refugees. Indeed, fewer Syrian Christians have been resettled in almost 4 years of current administration than in the last year that Barack Obama was in office alone. With these harsh policies, the president has lost our votes. So now they go on to say, and very quickly so, right, that it doesn't mean they're going to vote for Biden, obviously, but it says that our conscience will not allow us to vote for Trump again. But they still leave a door open to it because, of course, right? Quote, we believe he could change his mind. He could set the refugee ceiling at the historical normal of 95,000. He could restore the asylum program. He could also work with Congress to pass immigration reform based on restitution, advocated by a broad range of evangelical Christians that would create a new legal pathway to eventual citizenship, which Bush and Obama tried but failed to do. These are small things that he could do, right? And so here's these evangelicals saying, we're not going to vote for you unless you do some stuff for us. Now, I wish the progressive left would do a little bit more of that and be like, well, we're not going to vote for you unless we get like Medicare for all, or less, unless we get some more, I guess, to bring you closer to the Green New Deal, things like that. But I don't think there's quite enough of us to be able to credibly make that threat. Whereas evangelicals, there's definitely a lot of those people. And if enough of them do make those threats, that might make the president pay attention. So I'm not sure. Now, they also say it's likely that he won't do this stuff. Quote, we know it might take a miracle for the president to reverse course in his immigration policies at this point, but unless he does so, he will forfeit our votes, and as the polls suggest, many others will. Look, I don't know if that's going to happen, and I don't know if, if that happens, what impact it would really have. I mean, you look at the polls, they're tightening up quite a bit, especially in certain swing states. And so there's certainly a case to be made that every vote is going to matter in this election. And so now, again, here's why the president won't do these things. I think the president wants the white nationalist vote. I think he's very intent on getting that vote. And that he believes that, well, you may not like me. I may not have done things that you want, but look at Biden. He's more evil. He's just like Hillary Clinton. He's, supporting the radicals in Portland and the Antifers and all those people, right? Which, of course, Biden is not. Very clearly not. Biden is about as law and order as you can get. 94 crime bill guy. And he's come out and said, no. Rioting is not protesting. Violence is not protesting. This is an actual quote. And that he was going to use the fullest extent of the law to people caught doing that stuff. And he chose the top cop as his running mate. And so, yeah. But again, Donald Trump, he'll lie to his audience, as he always does, lie to his base, because that's all he really does. And now he's also going to continue to try to get the support of the white nationalist vote. And so why? Because he agrees with them. He doesn't agree with the evangelicals. He's barely even a Christian. Like a lot of Christians, he ain't even a Christian, really, because he doesn't adhere to anything and doesn't even understand hasn't read the books. Now, of course, I'm an atheist. The biggest reason I'm an atheist is because I actually started reading the Bible. But hey, sometimes it has the opposite effect on other people, where the more they read it, I guess the more into it they are. I don't know. I'm just going to say, like, the people that are the white nationalists, they're much more loud. They're very pushy. And Donald Trump, as I said before, agrees with them. He loves the idea of being cruel to immigrants because he believes that it's a political advantage to keep them out of the country. He says they're going to come in, they're going to vote for Democrats, which is not true. They can't vote, and they don't. Voter fraud is incredibly limited. A few hundred, fake ballots or whatever. out of hundreds of millions. But he doesn't care. He's not going to take any chances on that. That said, maybe if the polls switch enough and the evangelical voters he believes will follow through, might outnumber the outright xenophobic Republicans who would never, of course, consider voting for Joe Biden. Well, he might switch positions or he might just lie. And it might be effective enough to get people to vote for him anyway. Because again, you've got the lesser of two evils on the Republican side. I don't know. But I do know that this op-ed serves one purpose, and it's a warning. It's a warning to Trump. I'm, again, pretty sure that they're not going to be going to Joe Biden. But there is a possibility that some could stay home. And again, if it's enough, who knows? There's some cracks in Trump's support. That's all I'm saying. Again, it's not really enough to rely on that. I think Joe Biden has to really energize his base. I have a few ideas how, but it's very unlikely that Donald Trump's going to act on them, which is, a real shame because this election is going to be tight enough as it is. And Trump, I still see him as having a pretty good chance, a very real chance of winning this election and keeping the White House.